Hi and welcome to part 3, and I'm continuing to refine the lion on this first section of this video. So you're not going to see a massive amount of difference now because he's fairly complete anyway, so it's just little things like doing the tail now, blocking that back in where I've had to go over it with the background. As I said, refining the colours, just highlighting here and there, darkening here and there. But not major differences now on the lion. The blue background's complete. The top of the grasses are pretty much complete as well. So all this is dry at the moment, so it's a new day. And just going back over it really. And as I said, just slight refinement of areas. So now obviously my underpainting is kind of a better map than it was at the beginning after my first blocking. So now I can adjust the colours, adjust the textures much more easily because I've got this almost complete underpainting. So nothing difficult about this part, nothing dramatic is going to change about this part, and then a lot of this video is going to concentrate on those grasses. I'm not going to go too detailed on them because I want them blurry in the background, a little bit blurry in the foreground, and then where the line is in that midground more detail. But I don't want the grasses to be the centre of interest. They're not very distinctive in the photograph anyway. They're quite subdued because the lion is moving and they're giving a sense of movement as well. So just darkening up sections of the tail. It's mainly black, then I've got a small amount of blue in there, and then I've blended that into just a little bit of that body colour which is still wet on my palette. Just darkening the tail, so as you can see, just touching areas up. It's easier if I could get across the canvas out of the onto the opposite side to paint this, but the camera's recording in the way. So I'm trying my best to angle my body. It's one thing I rather about pastels and filming with pastels. I can get completely out the way and just forget about the camera. With painting, because I'm upright, it's much more awkward to try and stay out the way and position your body so you can actually enjoy painting. Using a very dry brush now, so when I pick up the paint that's on the palette, sometimes I actually wipe the end of the brush just a little bit on some kitchen tissue to take a lot of the paint off. So it's almost like glazing. As you can see, I'm just scrubbing the surface. So it is really a glaze as such because you can see through it. It's just very thinly applied paint. So scumbling on the surface. Seeing a small amount of paint goes a very long way then when you've got that underpainting done and dry. And just rubbing the surface quite gently to do it. If you want a more distinctive mark, just push a little bit harder or apply a small amount more paint. So the line's looking much more refined again, and I'm starting to work once again on the background grasses. They need to be subdued just a little bit more, using that bristle long flat brush, making sure my strokes are quite repetitive. The main colours here are Naples yellow, yellow ochre, and then I've put a small amount of burnt umber in there as well, and a very tiny amount of ultramarine blue to deaden it down. You can see light strokes. So I'm going to continue with doing this kind of blocking in first, because I need to get the background, or the grasses really, dark enough underneath, subdued enough under there as well, and then I'm going to come in with some more distinctive strokes. So not much thinners yet. I haven't used any medium at all in this painting other than odorless paint thinners, just to thin it slightly. No other mediums at all in it. So blocking in a bit more of that bluey colour. So that's kind of the lion colour. And then into that I've put some Windsor red, and you've got to be very careful with that. Such an absolute power colour that if you put more than just a little dot on your brush, it takes over any of your mixes. So that's Windsor red. Be careful with that, but I've got a little bit of that in there, and also a small amount of ultramarine blue. And then if I want to make that even darker, I can just add a bit more of those. So they're giving me that warm bluey colour that's in the bottom right hand corner under the lion. That darker colour. And some more of that sap green in there. Those suggestions of the foliage. All wet on wet at the moment now, blending in. I want that soft look to it. So that's that subdued underpainting done, and now I'm using some sap green darkened down with some burnt umber, and I'm going to put in the suggestion of plants, twigs, grasses, and then I'm going to blend them out with a soft brush. So these are still, you know, not quite foreground type grasses. They're back a bit. I don't want them to be too distinctive, but I can't paint them blurry. I'm going to have to put them in quite hard edged at the beginning, and then I'm just going to blend them with a soft brush. So they're not grasses as such, these. They are kind of plants. I don't know what they are, but they've got bobbly bits on them as well, like seed pods. And obviously at the moment they're looking way too dark and way too sharp edged. It's the first thing you're looking at really as you're looking at the painting. But when they blend in and subdue down, they'll be okay. Grass looks absolutely terrible at this stage, and it's something I've never really got used to with oils, whereas you've got to, have a dirty stage underneath really. Whereas when you're doing things like coloured pencils or pastels, it can look pretty good at all stages because you're quite going fairly detailed quite quickly compared to oils, whereas the oils really come into their own perhaps in the last session or two of your painting, and all the first few sessions, unless you're doing something like a big portrait and you're working on the eyes and you're finishing them off pretty much before going on. When you're doing oils, a lot of it actually looks quite disappointing, and people can give up quite quickly, too early on a painting. You've got to stick with it with oils. And again, some of those lighter marks in now. So it's a lot more Naples yellow, titanium white. And I'm going to blend a lot of this again. So it's another layer ready for blending really. So you can see now that lighter background has gone in. Those plants that were under the chin area of the lion are not looking really distinctive now, so they're a bit more subdued. And once I've got these lighter marks in, I'm going to blend that back down just a little bit again, because there's different tones even in the background. There's your lights and your darks and your mid-tones, so they still all need to be put in even if they're going to be blended. You still need that variety of tones and textures in there. Some areas are a lot lighter than I'm putting in now, where that sun is really catching the grasses. And that's a fairly soft bristle brush. It's not too soft because the paint on there is quite firm, so it's not slipping around on the canvas. So I can go fairly firm on the bristle brush, and anyone will work. You don't have to have anything special. So that's just blending in, but it's giving another layer of detail, depth, colour change to the background. Then I can come in with some lighter strokes again, so you can see now what I mean about the layering of the background is also very similar to the layering of fur, building up depth with it. Okay, so time to start to put in some more distinct grass. So I've got a large rigger. Now you could use the bristle one or the synthetic one that I'm using now, you know, from any brand you want. But it's quite large. I'm getting a chiseled edge on there. You've seen me do this probably on my YouTube videos where I chisel the edge. If you look at the whiskers one on YouTube, basically I draw the brush through the paint one side, then I flip it and do it on another side, so it gets a sharp, flat edge to it, and that's what I'm using to paint, as you can see. If I used it rounded, because obviously the rigger is a round brush really, then the marks would be too thick and I would have to thin the paint down so much that they wouldn't hold the nice opaque paint that I want for this stage anyway. So that's why I do those chiseled edges. So not putting in too many marks. I'm not making this too distinctive because it's all very similar colors. They all kind of merge anyway. So it's not as if I'm painting, you know, individual grasses, individual little pieces and where the highlights are catching as well. I'm just getting that general tone in, just a general texture at the moment. So as I'm continuing with this now, it's starting to look a bit more like grass. There's a mark there I thought was a bit too thick, so I just came in straight away with some kitchen tissue, wiped it off, no problem at all. One of the joys of oil painting. So yeah, I'm a bit more happy with the grasses now that I'm getting another layer on and starting to add some more detail to it. Using the rigger brushes now just to get those real hard edge marks. I'm just softening just a few of the back ones, just slightly. Keeping a lot of the foreground ones untouched now. Making sure the strokes go fairly random. I'm going to make some of these little plants, these green areas by the lion's legs, more distinctive. So I'm using a smaller rigger, I'm using sap green and a little bit of burnt umber to dull it down. Also a little bit of ultramarine here and there as well. And just using dabbing motions because that's indicating the leaves. It's adding a bit more interest, it's giving some texture as well. Getting these in now so I can then overlap more of those foreground grasses on top of them. But I'm not creating, you know, I'm not really trying to make individual plants and make them really detailed. I'm just getting the suggestion in. I'm letting the viewer's eye then work out and fill in the blanks really. They know it's going to be it's plants and foliage. So I don't need to have every little bit of stick and twig and leaf in there. This is not, as I said, a real hyper-realistic type of painting. This is more showing you the techniques. You can spend a lot more time when you're doing your subject, whatever that would be, using these techniques. But I just wanted to really get, you know, the feeling and show you how I did skin on the body that had very little hair texture to it. Because lots of you asked about how do you do very, very short fur. So that's how I would do that. I also wanted to show you the basic principles of doing grasses as well. So a few more details added to the bushes. More foliage just to make it slightly more distinctive. Standing out there much better now. Still all doing this in one session. At any time I could just stop really, but when I want softness in an area, that's when I like to work wet in wet. And I'm finding I'm layering no problem with these detailed marks so far, so I probably will finish this all in one session now. So now I darkened that foreground, then I can come in again now with these lighter marks. And I don't want the foreground to be really hard edged, because one way to have worked this would have been to have actually gone in with a palette knife for the foreground ones to make them really stand proud and to be hard edged, and that can be a lovely look sometimes when you're doing it. I did that on a large leopard painting I did quite a few years ago, and the grasses worked out very good by doing that. But on this small scale I wanted to keep the foreground grasses quite blurred out, so it's got like a shallow depth of field. It's only the part that the lion is in really that's in sharp focus. You see I'm using that softening brush there then just to knock off the really hard edges just on the foreground. So the smaller rigger brush now with plenty of paint on there to get these real hard edged, light coloured, sharp grasses. So these are the ones that are really the predominant ones. Got to have a thin enough paint so that the paint comes off the brush, but not too thin that it's sloppy. Not going all in one direction. Sometimes I'm just doing small marks as well, which is indicating where the sunlight is catching just perhaps a section of the grass rather than the whole thing. See, sometimes just a little mark is all that's required. And by putting a couple actually over the lion as well, it sets that back. Shows the viewer absolutely that the grasses are in front, not behind the lion. It's overlapping. So quite a long process now doing these grasses. Took me a good hour or so to actually keep layering those, just like I would lay a fur, layering the grass. So coming in with the rigger now with some warmer tones. Doesn't all have to be the same Naples yellow type of colour. Warmer tones, darker tones, because the highlight grasses won't show up if we've got nothing dark underneath them. So I'm putting in larger marks there just so that I can then blend them on that very foreground. And obviously there's quite a bit of distortion looking at the camera angle on the this video. Obviously on the left is much closer to the camera, just so I can get into position. You see, blending just on the front edge now. Coming back in now to put in the final highlights on the lion. The chin is the whitest part, it's the brightest highlight on the whole painting, so that makes you look at it. It's next to the black lips as well and the nose, so it's a real centre of interest on there. Using the fine brush. I don't know if you can pick it up on the video, but I'm not covering all of the underpainting. You can still see some of the darks under there. That may not be showing up perfectly on the video. Getting the shape right, adjusting that. And then I need to do a bit on the muzzle as well. And then I can just refine the lion's head again then. You see how it's starting to come more again from the background, so that's why I save these highlights for the final part. And I can always subdue these with a glaze if I wanted to the following day or two, or even put the painting away, you know, for quite a few days and then come back fresh eyes and see if I want to glaze here and there. Glaze just basically a colour thinned down with a medium so you can see through it. Zoom back in now so you can see some more of these head and face details going on. So quite fine strokes, but not putting in too much detail. You can't really when the paintings are so small. And I'm sitting back and going from the canvas quite frequently to see which details are actually showing up when I'm 5 or 6 foot away, and as to whether or not there's any point then of putting them in at all. If I can't see them 5 or 6 foot away, I don't even bother with them. Important now for the final marks to be in the right place. Resting my hand on that marl stick all the time to keep it nice and steady. Just some more detailing, just some highlights really. Putting in a few more furry marks just to give the face that little bit more interest. Bearing in mind, if you're looking at this on a computer screen, you're probably watching it at larger than life size as well, so you've got to take that into consideration when you're looking at the amount of detail in a painting as to how big it is. And what a lot of people do when they do these paintings and pastels that are very, very detailed looking, they take quite a small subject, perhaps a cat, and they do it on a very large scale. So perhaps they're taking a close-up of a cat's head and then they're doing it on a A3 piece of paper, and then you can put in details and they're not that detailed, but when you see it on screen it's all shrunk down again. It looks like there's an incredible amount of detail on there. So by painting large, that's one way to get the detail. You can see using the rigger again. Fairly thin paint now, because it's going on a dry underpainting, so it's got to be able to flow off the brush, but not too much. And just a few highlights on the mane, and that's an area I may come back in a few days time or a week or two time and actually put a bit of glaze on it. I'm not sure yet, I'll wait to see. And that's a great thing with oil painting, you haven't got to rush to finish it. It can just stand around now and dry off fully, and the glaze will be perfectly okay to go on top. Zoom back out now so I can just have a look at the whole painting together, see what else needs to be done. Just refining a few of these darks that's gone a little bit mucky, a little bit muddy looking. Just need a dark on the back of this leg as well, just to separate those legs off too. Nothing really too contrasty. And as I said, what I may do with this painting is put it away for a couple of days and then come back to it then and see if I want to add some glazes, if I want to warm an area up or even cool an area down with a glaze of a very subdued blue. When I'm looking at the painting myself, it's actually a bit more punchy than this. Just cleaning up that edge, just where the grasses have gone over the top, because I'd rather the grasses muddy up an edge and then re-establish the edge on the lion than try to butt up against the outline of the lion and end up with a real hard edge or a ridge of paint there. So much better to go over it, and then I can overlay the lion colour quite simply over the top of it. Quite happy with the way the grasses are turned out now. Not too detailed, but not too blurry either. Just finishing up this edge, which needed to go a small amount darker, just to make it look like that shape is going around. Otherwise it's looking a little bit too cut out on the belly. And then I can blend this up with some lighter strokes then, lighter colours, lighter tones there. Blend it up to give it that rounded appearance. Just a very light touch when I'm blending. So as I'm coming to the end of the painting, hope you've enjoyed it, hope you've learnt a few tips and techniques. And this is a bit more subdued than lots of the paintings and the pastels that I do. Some of them are quite vibrant and more punchy in colours, but sometimes the natural scenes are less punchy. So hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you all again real soon.